Everyone. Thank you for joining once again. I'm just waiting for Jaco, my co-panelist, to unmute himself so we can start. There you go, Jaco. Good morning, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Schalk.
Good evening, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I think I'm gonna start by sharing my first property hunt in 2006. I can remember so well walking into real estate agents into the offices, being so scared, and I didn't know why I was scared. But reflecting back, I think the reason or reasons are when you walk into an estate agent's office, the first question you might be asked is, "Are you qualified? Do you have a bond approval? Do you have finances? Do you have a?" And all those questions are hard questions, especially if you do not have a budget, just an amazing or strong vision or goal, wanting to buy a property, not knowing how. And the first step is to walk into an office and let's start with the viewings. That's obviously the wrong way. And I think, Jaco, you might have seen it as well in your world. I know you bought a property recently. Is that something that you've experienced as well in your property hunting journey?
Yes, we have. Being in an industry for a couple of years, we thought it would be easy, but we still also had the stress, looking at property, are we making the right decision? What should we look for? And all those things. So it is, very, very daunting experience, especially the bond application on my side. I can speak from the finance side. I was also very stressed out, for my own bond application that I handled. And I, again, just appreciated the buyer's stress, going through the process, waiting, am I going to be approved? Is everything in order? What rate am I going to get? So I, again, just stepped back and saw what every buyer feels like. So just, again, reiterated that we should have the same feeling as the buyers at some stage, just to feel what they feel like.
Absolutely. With that being said, let's start our presentation for tonight. And once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We're happy to answer the questions. Even if once we finish and there's good questions, for those who want to stay behind, we're happy to answer questions until probably 8:15. Our aim is to finish this within the next 15 minutes to an hour. And please feel free that should you have any more questions to engage with us afterwards and to get more information. Purchasing property sometimes is very well with planning a holiday, and often people spend more time planning a holiday than actually doing planning and research on purchasing a home. If I know what I know today about property, purchasing my first two properties, I'm glad that the one was a good investment. The other one has been with me for 10, 12 years. And we've just starting to see positive capital growth. So if I know what I know today, I would have definitely made a few different decisions back then. So what you're doing tonight is definitely different to what I've done by equipping yourself with good knowledge, good information, to when you put pen to paper that you have peace of mind, that you have done all the ticks with or the checks in terms of what can be prevented in making a wrong decision. I have to reiterate when I discuss this is purchasing property is very emotional. We cannot ignore the emotional side of buying a home. Maybe investment property is less emotional, but your own home definitely emotional. So the information we're sharing tonight is definitely helping you not to be as emotional with the purchase of your property, so that we prevent being very emotional when you sell one day. The worst face that we see often is when we arrive at someone's property wanting to sell with the thinking that they've bought very well many years back, and for us to break the news that you've overpaid for the property in a certain market, and that is a very bitter pill to swallow. So once again, with the information tonight, we're going to help you to prevent that going forward. Sorry, my screen here. Good. I'm going to do a quick overview for you on the market performance currently, where we are in the market with our pandemic and recession. I think it's important just to highlight a few points to get more clarity on what exactly can we expect post-COVID, our recession. I'm going to refer back to the history to enable us to predict a bit more what's going to happen in the future. So bear with me as I share with you a few slides. On this slide, you can see that this is the national nominal house price growth over the last 20 years. Sorry, let's look at my screen here. You can see the white line is 2008. The dip there is the 2008 recession. In 2008, we've had a negative GDP growth of 2.5%. With the negative GDP of minus 2.5%, we've seen property prices decline by 5%. This is national statistics, not regional. So once again, if you speak to your property consultant or your sales partner, please ask the questions of what has happened in their town or suburb during 2008. If we look at the next graph, also given to us by Lightstone, is the house price growth should our country see a 6% negative GDP. So that is what Rawson is predicting. They either have a 3%, a 6%, or a minus 10% GDP forecast for 2020. If we take the middle road, minus 6%, we can see that the house prices will decline by about 10% for freehold, for sectional title, minus 5%. If we look at the worst case scenario, a GDP of minus 10%. Also, once again, these data has been given to us by Lightstone, and they've given us these three scenarios. A reputable company and one that's been collecting data for many, many years. If we look at the worst case scenario and we experience a minus 10% growth, we might see that house prices decline by minus 14%. But once again, one has to look at the freehold and sectional title as two different property classes, and you can see that a worst case scenario could be a minus 15% drop in property prices. The question here might be, should I wait to see the 15% drop? The question should be rather, in what price bracket are you intending to purchase? If you're purchasing property, anything under 2 million Rand or 2.5 million Rand, even if you purchase in the Helderberg, you're in the price category, which is seen as the affordable price category. And we would advise you not to wait for that perfect time to purchase, but once with all the data and the research and help with your sales partner to make a decision when you have found the right property. The next slide is just to show you how house prices has performed in comparison with the national GDP over the last 50 years. You can see house prices have seen on two occasions, 1985 and 2010, negative nominal growth, and the GDP quite often has seen negative growth. But what we can see with this slide is the GDP growth and house price growth go hand in hand. Over there you can see 2010, where we've seen a minus 2.5% GDP and property prices declined by minus 5%. Here's our saving grace. And if we look at our interest rates, excuse me, we can see that in 2008, our interest rate was 14.5%. Compare that to 2020, where we are today, we're sitting on 7.25%. Now, this is the saving grace for the property market, alongside a few other factors. And what we can see here is if you bought a £1 million property in 2008, your bond installment would have been 12,799 if you bought the property over 20 years, 20-year term. And today it is 7,903 Rand. Now, here is where we have huge opportunity, and this is why we believe we'll see investors returning to the market, as in many cases, you'll find that where people are currently renting properties, it's cheaper to purchase a property if you have the affordability and if you have a good credit record. And that's why we have Jaco here tonight than to rent the property. So this is very good news, and this is the first time in 50 years that we see such a low interest rate. Just another graph that I'd like to share with you. This is from FNB. If you bought a R1 million property in 2013, and we take the growth that we've seen in the Western Cape, and we can now look at the graph here, Somerset West, Strand, Gordons Bay, we can see that there was a 62.5% increase in property prices from quarter to 2013 to quarter to 2018. From 2018 to 2020, growth on most properties has gone sideways. It wasn't negative, but it's gone sideways. And if you take this as an example, your property would have been worth today 1.6 million rand. If you had to take out a 100% bond in 2008, the wealth that you would have accumulated today in equity would have been 600,000 rand. If you've rented the property out and received rental income, you can do the calculation on the shortfall that you would have had. You could have seen how wealth is created by purchasing property. And once again, there's two arguments here. One, you can buy cash. It's a different calculation to when you uses the bank's money to create wealth for yourself. So this is again, why we're so excited about what's ahead of us in terms of property growth. It might not be in the next year or 2 or 3, but looking at a 5-year view, looking at the interest rates that we have at the moment, it is possibly the best time to get, one of the best times to get into the property market. Here's some key factors that's in favor of the property market. We have received the downgrade to junk status. And why I say this is in favor of the property market, it's not necessarily a positive, but we haven't seen any media discussing our junk status. It has been mentioned, but if it wasn't for COVID-19, this would have been the headlines for many, many months. It's sort of as if the whole world is in junk status given the pandemic that we have. So this could be, this is real. Cost of our capital will be more expensive, but luckily we do know that our banking sector is currently at a healthy state. We also benefit from our weak exchange rate. Foreign buyers, if you take the 1st of January this year to today's date, properties has become 20% cheaper for any foreign purchaser. Interest rates, as I just mentioned, it's the lowest in more than 50 years. And if you have, if you own a R1 million property today or the 1st of January this year, if you take the bond installment from 1st of January to today, you've got a saving already of 1,582 Rand. Also, in order to purchase a property of 1 million Rand, the salary needed was 31,000 Rand. It's now only 26,000 Rand. Jaco, maybe on this a question. Have you seen the last few weeks since we've come out of lockdown an increase in first-time buyers and investors, especially because of the salary bracket that is now sort of open to a lower bracket and people can actually afford to get into the market?
Yes, Schalk, we've seen a huge influx of requests, firstly for pre-qualifications, clients who are currently renting their properties, and more or less, in some instances, for the same that they're paying the rental for, they will be able to afford the bond installment on the value of that property. So we've seen a huge influx of pre-qualifications coming through, firstly, and then also the last 2-3 weeks, we've also seen quite a lot of interest in the property price bracket, around about 2 million, as you mentioned earlier on, 1.8 to 2.3, 2.5 million even. We've seen a lot of interest in that price bracket. First-time buyers coming into the market that can now qualify to buy those homes where beginning of the year or end of last year, the clients couldn't qualify. It was just outside the bracket. Now it's within the affordability range and we've got a lot more interest, yes.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jaco. Next, we're all aware of the stock market crash, and we've seen, because of that, a return of investors to invest in bricks and mortar, and also our 10-year bonds. A positive, also, for just to fill you in on why we won't see a 2008 repeat. In 2008, we've had a lot of homeowners that had negative equity in their property. basically the bond installment was, the bond, outstanding bond on the property was in most cases more than what they could have achieved for the property. In the previous slide that I've showed you, you can see that from 2013 to 2018, we've seen in the Helderberg a 63.5% growth in our properties. So good equity. So the distressed market that we had in 2008 with distressed sellers coming to the market, I don't think we'll see as many as we've seen in 2008. The question is, are we in a buyer's or seller's market? We are most definitely in a buyer's market if you speak generically. I would like to point out, though, that this is a discussion that you should have with your agent. In different price brackets, you'll find that you might be in a normal to seller's market depending on the price bracket that you're in. So if I take an example, if you purchase property between 800,000 Rand and 1.5 million Rand in Somerset West, you are in a normal to seller's market where demand is not necessarily higher than supply. It's more where the supply is less than the demand. So if you speak generically, yes, we're in a buyer's market, meaning there's more stock available than purchases. But it's also important to look at in what price bracket you are looking to invest or to purchase, and to inquire with your agent in terms of what offers would most likely be accepted. I've had an example last week where one of my friends bought a property, and the question was, Schalk, if the asking price was 1.495 million Rand, and the question to me came, Schalk, can we offer 1.3 million Rand for this property? My feedback was, let's look at the market trends, and my advice was, I don't think you should offer anything less than 1.45, given the statistics presented. They made an offer of 1.425, the offer was accepted. So on their side, they've made a very good purchase, and it was not 200,000 less than asking price, but the 1.425 was 180,000 less than the highest price achieved in previous months in this same estate. So this is a discussion definitely between yourself and your agent, and make sure that it's not an opinion, it's backed with data. So here is where I will definitely need Jaco's help. Your first step is basically to get yourself pre-approved and also to determine the affordability. So I'm going to hand over to Jaco to take us through the 3 methods that they use to determine your affordability in pre-qualifying yourself. Jaco, thank you.
Thank you, Schalk. Yes, there's basically 3 calculation methods the banks use when they assess a client's affordability. The first one is your 30% gross limitation calculation. That is an old rule that states your monthly installment on your home loan is not allowed to exceed 30% of your combined gross income. Now, very importantly, it's 30%, not 1/3. There's a mistaken belief in the market that it's 1/3 of your income. 1/3 is 33%, and that might result in a decline. So they look at 30% of your gross income, and they limit your monthly installment on your home loan to that amount. So that's a rule of thumb that the banks use, and also to stop clients over-indebting themselves. There's the second calculation, the net surplus calculation. That is where the banks assess your affordability based on your net salary paid into your bank account, less all your monthly contractual debt, less your living expenses, normal expenses like cell phone, insurance, those kind of things. In other words, what can you afford to pay? Now, those 2 walk hand in hand. They look at what you can afford. That's the most important calculation in terms of the National Credit Act. But they limit it to the 30% gross because they don't want a situation where you spend your full available surplus on your home loan and then the interest rates goes up, or an emergency arises, you don't have sufficient left at the end of the month. So those 2 walk hand in hand. The third calculation is the debt to service ratio. That's an unofficial calculation the banks do make. It's never broadcasted or advertised anywhere, but the banks do take this into consideration more and more these days. That is where they look at your total combined contractual debt. That is vehicle finance, personal loans, retail accounts, and all those contractual obligations, your monthly installment on all those, including the new home loan, is not allowed to exceed between 45 and 50% of your gross income. Now, it depends from bank to bank. Some banks are 45%, other banks are 50%, and they sometimes waive that rule for their own clients, but that is based on the bank's appetite for business at that time. If they've got a full wallet, they might waive it up to 55%. If their wallet is empty, they'll stick to the 45%. So that's why that is never broadcasted or advertised anywhere. It's an internal ratio they use, which they use more and more these days because they're very worried about client over-indebting themselves. So these three calculations together, that is what the banks use when they assess your affordability, and that is also the same calculations we make or use when we do your affordability calculation on our side.
Yeah, so if I earn 10,000 Rand, give me a quick idea of how much I can afford to purchase for.
10,000 Rand, we look at the gross limitation calculation. On 10,000 Rand on the gross limitation, it's about 375,000 that the banks will limit you to. That is the first calculation, the 30% gross. Next calculation will be the available net surplus. We'll look at your net amount paid into your bank account, less your monthly expenses. And in order to qualify for that bond, you need about 3,200 Rand per month available after all expenses have been paid to pay towards the bond installment. Now, we more often get the question from clients where they say, but Jaco, I don't have 3,000 Rand left at the end of the day, or whichever amount we need to qualify for the bond. Then we explain to clients, the banks are aware of that. They will look at your firstly, fixed expenses. That is like cell phone, insurance policies, DSTV, those kind of things. They are quite lenient on your spending, if we can call it that, like groceries, entertainment, your current rent, which is taken into consideration as well. So all those factors the banks do look at. So although clients sometimes say, Jaco, I don't have much money left, at the end of the day, we explain to the client, don't worry about that. The banks are aware of that. And that is also why it's important for us to put the application to the banks properly, where we motivate everything. Sometimes clients capture the rental income or sort of the rental expense on the application form, including investments, which will cease once the clients purchase a property. Now, those obviously is part of your available net surplus, and that is what we then also motivate to the banks.
Okay, so if I earn 10,000 Rand and I have current outstanding debt and my rent, for example, is 5,500 Rand, or let's say 4,000 Rand, and I can actually afford to purchase the property, but I do have outstanding debt, is it a good time to at least qualify yourself as well and see where you can save, and for you to, do you often give advice to purchasers where they can how they can better present themselves to purchase in the coming months?
Yes, it's very important to pre-qualify yourself as quickly as possible to see what is your purchasing power at the moment. What can you qualify for, taking into consideration your existing exposure and existing expenses. If you do not qualify for the home loan, let's say, for example, you've got too much contractual debt or too many policies on your name, that's where we walk the path with clients. We're not going to tell you, no, you don't qualify. We'll assist you. We'll say, right, you, for example, qualify for 200,000 instead of 375. But if you, for example, amalgamate some of your policies, sometimes clients have got 3 or 4 life policies where if you combine it into one, you'll have a lower installment for the same cover. We look at that. We look at debt consolidation. Sometimes some retail accounts can be quite expensive, and it could be that clients has got 2 or 3 separate personal loans. If you consolidate all of those into one, you'll have a much lower monthly installment on the same outstanding debt that you used to have. So we definitely, yes, advise clients what to do in order to be able to purchase a property. If not now, 6 months down the line or 9 months down the line. We really like giving advice to clients how to set up the affordability going forward.
Jaco, and so I can purchase property if I'm not a purchaser sitting here listening tonight. If I have outstanding debt, I have credit cards, I have got my car payment still. It's good to at least be qualified, to get yourself qualified to be ready for when you are ready to purchase. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Even if you do have that debt, as long as it falls within the ratios, you can qualify for a bond now. But if it does not fall into the ratios, that is where we then explain to the client, okay, let's see, maybe settle that debt. Once you've settled that one, work towards that, and then we will be able to assist with a bond. So yes, you can still purchase either now or in the future.
So just something I've seen often also happening is the credit check that is obviously part of the affordability and the pre-qualification. In my opinion, it's vital that is often people are not aware of bad credit. That, for example, a cell phone account that was closed many years back and it's got a negative effect on their credit record. Is that part of your service where if you do the pre-qualification, that you do the credit checks and advise your client where they can improve their credit record?
Most definitely, yes. There's a couple of usual suspects, we could call it that, where if a client purchases a property, they're not aware of bad debt. There's sometimes Pathcare, I know, to single them out. There are sometimes where a client has medical aid. He thought the medical aid covered all the blood tests when they went to the doctor, but there was one or two accounts that was not covered, and unbeknown to the client, he was listed due to that. It happens to all kinds of purchases, from the bottom spectrum to the top spectrum. So it's very important to know your credit history before you purchase a property. To fix it, firstly, as we've said now, there could be small things that you're not aware of, but then also secondly, to have a look at your contractual debt. We have had instances in the past where a client has purchased a vehicle, he sold his old vehicle, purchased a new vehicle, but the dealer never removed the old vehicle's monthly installment off the credit bureau. They made the outstanding balance zero, but the monthly installment still remained. So it seems as if the client is paying two vehicles instead of one. So that is very important to pick up, and that will pick up with the credit check. A credit check is twofold, not just to see if the client's got defaults or judgments, it's also to see what contractual debt are reflecting on your name. It also assists us when we approach the banks. Sometimes DSTV or a client's insurance and some medical aids we've even picked up reflected under the credit bureau as a contractual debt. So once we submit the application to the banks, they also do a credit check on their side. And if we declare, for example, the insurance as a living expense, they will have it as a contractual debt, and then the expense is duplicated at the banks, which will result in a decline that we need to manually arbitrate on our side.
Thank you for that, Jaco. It's a mouthful. As you can see, it's a lot of preparation and some work to be done on your side to make sure why you do this. And why you do this as your first step is once you go out on the house hunt, that you can tell your agent that you are pre-qualified and you have done all the credit checks, so that when you do make the offer and when you obviously find the perfect property, that the agent can present you as a qualified buyer. There's nothing worse than presenting an offer to a seller with a cash offer, for example. You might be 20,000 or 50,000 better than the competing offer, but because we are not sure whether you pre-qualified and have done the credit checks, your offer often comes second, even though it's higher than the cash offer. So definitely something worth looking at. And again, we have this service in the Rawson Helderberg to help you. It's free of charge. Jaco is available on email and on cell phone anytime. You're most welcome to phone him. Jaco, then there's a few options to consider when you obviously in the financing journey. Can you take us through a few questions that we've had and just help the listeners tonight what your opinion or your thoughts are on the following few questions?
Sure, yes. Right, first question, should I fix my interest rates? Depending, it's an interesting question. The banks currently know that we are at quite a low interest rate cycle. So they are aware that it's quite low. It might go up at some stage. So it depends on what fixed rate the banks offer you. Now, unfortunately, the banks do not offer fixed rates up front anymore these days, like in the older days. You can only request a fixed rate once your property and the bond is registered. The process is to approach the branch or the bank call center. They will then quote you a fixed rate, which is valid for 24 hours, which you then have to make your decision. Now, some clients have mentioned to me that those fixed rates that were offered to them by the bank was way above the variable rate that was approved, to 2.5% above. So it all depends on what rates and also what term. Normally it's between 2 to 5 years. So to answer the question, yes, if it's a very good rate they offer you, but it's very difficult to say if we don't know what kind of rate the bank is going to offer you on a fixed rate on registration.
Thank you. The next question, Jaco, is 25-year or 30-year bonds?
We get quite a lot of clients taking a 30-year bond option at this stage because of two reasons. You qualify for more, firstly, and then secondly, your monthly installment is lower. Now, yes, we are aware that you will pay a lot more interest if you do pay the bond over 30 years. That's very true. What a lot of clients are doing is they are taking the bond over 30 years with a lower installment, obviously, and then in their monthly budgets, they factor in a higher, an additional supplementary payment they make into the bond account. Traditionally, it's about 10%. So if you pay 10% more on your installment, you will pay the bond off over 20 years. So a lot of clients are opting for the 30-year bonds and then doing a manual payment, but they then do have that facility. If you get 1 month where the car needs new tires or the cat had kittens, you need the extra cash, then you can use that money that you are supplementing for the emergency fund. And then the next month, just go back to that. So lots of clients are taking a 30-year bond and then just paying more as they can.
Basically to get their foot in the door, is that right by saying that?
100% correct, yes. To start off with a low installment first round until you're used to it, and then kick off with a high installment to pay it off as quickly as possible.
Good.
Third question, I noticed there, bank versus us as bond originators. Interesting question. We receive that more and more these days. What happens is traditionally when a client approaches the bank himself, he's going to apply either through his private banker or through a financial advisor at the branch. Now, sometimes the private bankers and financial advisors, they sometimes take a bit of time to submit the application because clients tend to forget the financial advisors or private bankers, they handle all kinds of deals for the client. They do check accounts, credit cards, personal loans, vehicle finance, it's a whole spectrum. So it takes longer for them to submit the deals. And then also, we are on our side as bond originators, we have the technical know-how to do bonds because that's what we do on a daily basis. We only focus on home loans. That's what we do. We specialize in that. So if we submit a deal, we are directly connected with the bank's home loan processing center, all the bank's home loans processing centers. Whereas if a banker submits a deal from their side, they have to go through either the call center or an in-house home loan consultant with the bank, which can delay the application on that side. We've had some instances where we've had approvals a week and the client's direct channel has not had an approval yet. So we sometimes waste time if a client goes directly to the branch. But also what we've picked up on our side is, it's sad to say, but sometimes the bank counts on the loyalty factor if the client approaches the bank directly. They feel that the client has come into the branch, so 10 to 1 is going to stick to his own branch, so we're going to give the average rates. Whereas if we submit a deal on our side as originators, we submit billions on a yearly basis to the banks. So they give us preferential treatment on timeframes as well as interest rates. We do notice sometimes that the bank, as I mentioned earlier on, they count on the loyalty factor, so they don't give the best rate up front. Whereas if we submit a deal, the banks are aware that they're up against all the other banks. So they immediately sharpen their pencil on the rate. And then obviously we've got the other banks' answers that we can fight your own bank to get a better deal as well.
I must say, the first time round, I went through my banker, and the second time round with you, Jaco, and my rate was definitely a lot better than my first round. So I can definitely vouch for that. I thought I'm saving money, and it was not the case where Jaco was able to negotiate a better deal. Even it was actually not even my own bank that he managed to get the best deal at the end. So definitely,
it happens. Yes.
That helped me. The last one, Jaco, deposit. Does that help for a better rate?
Definitely, yes. It helps on two levels. Firstly, the banks, when they assess your application and your interest rate, they look at the risk factor associated to the application and the rate. Now, your risk is largely influenced by the deposits. To get the approval, firstly, the moment you share the risk with the banks, they're a lot more friendly in order to approve your application. So if you put a deposit down, you share the risk, you get a better approval, a quicker approval. On the interest rate, very much so. Your rate is solely based on a risk. and that risk has got a large influence. The deposit has got a large influence on the risk. So the deposit also works in increments of 5 and 10%. So it's a 5% deposit, 10%, 15 or 20% deposit. So definitely, yes, deposit has got a big influence on your application and your interest rate.
So saying that, I think we're not discussing it tonight, but 105% bonds are available. But as Jaco just shared, that will have an impact on your interest rate. But if you do not have any cash, that is available. And once again, speak to Jaco, he'll be happy to help you through that. Next up is your property hunt once you've qualified yourself. And the big question is, where do you start? If you go onto any of the online portals, you'll find that there is, as we have mentioned earlier, we're in a buyer's market, so there's an oversupply of properties in certain price brackets. And if you do not have an agent that you can work with to facilitate this process, the obvious way is to start online and to find the first 3, 4 properties that might suit you the best, given the photos and the descriptions. You might find that doing the inquiries that some people don't even get back to you is definitely not the case with Rawson. We are proud to have people with us that are serious to do business. And as soon as you've pressed the button to say, I inquire on a property, you will receive a feedback or call from the agent within the first hour or 2, unless they're busy with clients at that stage. So feedback is vital. And then the question is, once you engage with an agent, arrange the viewing, and it is vital for you to make the decision whether you want to do this, take this journey on your own, or whether you want to see whether you can build a relationship based on the knowledge of the agent to work with going forward. It is true that the seller is paying the commission to the agent, so the agent represents the seller. But as we all know, we live in an era where information is freely available. Your agent, should you choose the agent that you're going to be working with, can empower you with great information and actually take time to do some research for you and share the research with you in order to make sure you make the right decision. If you choose to work with multiple agents, it might be the case where they do not have the time to service you the way that you should be serviced with all the information that's needed, and also the interpretation of information and data. The question is, can one agent take you to all the listed properties? The answer is, in most cases, yes. So you might find that on many occasions that your agent will arrive with one of her or his colleagues at a property that you want to view. What happened behind the scenes, you're not paying more commission or more for the property. They are sharing the commission between themselves, so you're not paying more. That's often a myth where people believe there's 2 agents involved, it's going to be more expensive, or they're going to pay more for the property, or the seller might be less negotiable. That's not true. The commission is a fixed fee that's agreed with the seller, and the agents then split the commission. So one agent can take you to most properties on the market. Our agents will tell you if there's properties where we are not allowed to view. And that's purely because it might be a new listing and other agencies are not allowing us in the first few weeks or months to view the property. But that will be disclosed to you, and you have the option then to engage with that agent to view that specific property. But one agent, the one that you trust, given the information, their knowledge, the way they guide you in the process, is what can be done, and it will really be beneficial to you to make use of one agent. You might find that during the viewings, you will be presented with a brochure with typical information that I share on the screen now, with basic information, the earth size, the floor size, the bedrooms, levies, rates and taxes, but information that's more important than just the property details and features is the annexure that will be added to your agreement of sale, which is the fixtures and fittings. This ideally should be presented to you at the first viewing, should you really like this property, or definitely at the second viewing to go through the list, and make sure that everything listed is either, or all the features that you have seen in the property will stay behind. And the big question is, will they be in the same condition as when you viewed the property? Our annexure guarantees or protect you as a purchaser to make sure that when you viewed the property and the pool was clean, or the geysers were working, or the air conditioners were working, that it will be in that same condition when transfer takes place. This document is very important and will save you a lot of headaches if you go through it point by point and to know whether the items are included or excluded from the sale of the property. The next very important document that is often neglected or not even disclosed or shared or part of a contract is the seller's disclosure. When the CPA Consumer Protection Act came in 2008, as a seller cannot only rely on the FTSE's clause. You as a purchaser now have a document which is being shared with the agent on what items in the property, defects, latent and patent, is I can word this, will be made aware to you. Make sure you read through every question and every answer being given to the agent and obviously yourself as the purchaser. Where you have any further questions, please investigate. It's your responsibility to investigate anything further than what has been given to you by the agent via the seller. This is a long topic. We can talk for long about this. Our agents are all equipped with this. This does form part of all our agreements of sale, and you are protected as a purchaser, at least to know what you are purchasing. I want to allow a few minutes for the online poll. I'll really thank you for taking the time to just share some information with us. I want to ask Megan just to bring the poll live. It will not take more than 2 minutes of your time. Thank you very much. We're seeing the results coming in. We'll give it one more minute before we move on to the last 5 slides. Great to see the confidence level in the property market at 87% currently of people that are looking to invest in property in the next 6 to 12 months. That's great news. Great, Megan. I'm going to give it 15 more seconds and then we can move on. Thank you very much. Thank you, Megan. If you can end the poll first so we can continue with the last slides. We can share the results by email afterwards to all the listeners. Thank you very much. You can enter, you can close the poll. Good. The next slide is, how do you make an offer? The big question is, what valuation methods do we use? There's one belief that the municipal valuation is the value of the property. That's not true. The last municipal valuations were done in 2018. So it's important to ask this question to your agent, to what the current municipal valuation is. and your rates will be determined by using your municipal valuations. They do this every 4 years, but just to believe that the property value should be the same as the municipal value, that's not true. And as you can see, this was done in June 2018 and reflecting values in that time. Some people did not object and might have a municipal valuation that's quite high, which means when you can submit in 2022 your objection, it will be accepted given the market value at that time. The second is market value. Market value is willing buyer, willing seller, with a bit of emotion attached to it sometimes. So market value is taking all the recent sold properties, looking at what prices has been achieved in a suburb, for example, and compare that to properties that's currently on the market. And if you compare what have sold recently and compare that with what's in the market, you'll see there's a difference usually in the asking price to the sale price, and that percentage will be shared to you by your agent. The last method that we will be discussing tonight is the cost of rebuilding the property, the replacement value, and you will find in today's market that replacement value will be much higher than market value, given that we are in a seller's market. The higher you go in price brackets, if you go into the 3, 4, 5, 6 million rand price bracket, you'll find that market value is up to 20 to 30% less than replacement value. Just for information purposes, your insurance value will be determined on replacement value. The question on how much, we trying to answer the question of what offer to make. This is an example of a suburb outside a security estate, and you can see there's a lot of different properties. There's some with pools, some with no pools, some double stories, some smaller than the others. Here it's vital that your agent discuss with you the suburb report and their knowledge and their database back at their office to explain to you why certain properties have achieved certain prices. Compared to this one, we're in a security estate, most properties are the same, been built by the same developer, same type of finishes, and with the same earth sizes and property sizes most of the time. Here is a different approach to determining the value, because you have more sort of the same type of property, again, to be discussed between you and your agent. If you look at this graph for sales in an estate, you'll see a nice growth over the last 10 years, and you can see 2018, 19, and 2020, a slight decline in prices. That does not mean the prices necessarily are coming down. It all depends what the sizes are of the properties that sold in the last few years. Once again, if you go online, you will not find the house sizes yet in South Africa. You'll only find the earth sizes, and it will be inaccurate to determine your offer based on the sales figures of the last 3 years. We have seen in some estates negative growth, but it's to be proven to you by using the house sizes in the estate to make sure you're making good, to show you what type of offer you can be justified when presented to the seller. The next case, you can look at in a sectional title scheme, where we can see nice growth from 325 to 518,000 Rand. But you will note in the last few years, there has been a few sales less than the average sale price. Why is that? There could be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom unit on the second floor, for example. It could be that one unit's got a garage without a garage. So the information with regards to what's happening inside a security estate, sectional title, once again, the data is the power here, where the agent must equip you with the information of why a certain prices has been achieved in the past. The next one is the last few slides on the clauses that's most often overlooked with the offer to purchase. By the time you find the perfect property, emotions run high, and people often do not spend the time they need on the offer to purchase. Now, just for clarity purposes, an offer to purchase is which you complete that needs to be presented to the seller. Should the seller accept every clause as you presented it to the seller, it then becomes an agreement of sale. So up until the point where there's no agreement between buyer and seller, it is an offer to purchase currently in negotiation. So let me take you through a few slides on what is very important. The first one is the purchase price. You have the right to offer anything on a property. Protect yourself here to take the advice and the research and the data given to you by the agent to make sure you don't start with an offer that's too low, because by insulting your seller, you might not achieve the price that you might have got if you approach the seller more realistically on what the market is doing. Once again, this is open for you to decide what you want to offer. We discussed this earlier, the deposit. It is good to present the seller with a deposit, and also good in your favor when it comes to your bond application, but it's not needed. You can apply for 100% bond. Important is that the deposit, should you be paying a deposit, must be invested in an interest-bearing trust account. The interest for your benefit, and there is an admin fee for the attorneys. Make sure that before you release a deposit, you are familiar with the company you're transferring the deposit to. There has been cases where money has disappeared, so please ensure that the attorney that is being suggested by the seller, which is his right, is from a reputable company, and that your money is in an interest-bearing trust account, interest-bearing for your benefit. The mortgage bond, I'll need Jaco here to just give us some insight into the application and to some pitfalls with applying for a bond.
Right, yes, quite important these days to look at Schalk is some clients are inserting a particular sentence at a certain interest rate to protect themselves. The problem comes in if you apply for a bond of purchase price, let's say 2 million, bond amount is 2 million, and that bond amount is approved for 2 million at an interest rate of prime plus 5, then the client has to accept that in terms of the contract. So it's very important for the purchaser to look at that. We suggest the purchaser, obviously, to be realistic. You can't say I want the rate of prime minus 2. We suggest the purchaser to fill in there, if it's a first-time home buyer, we traditionally get between prime plus 0.5 if you don't have a track record, to put in there at an interest rate of 8% for argument's sake, just to protect yourself, not to be forced to take a very high interest rate on your side.
Right. So basically, Jaco, if I apply for a bond of R1 million, I can include a clause here, obviously with a consultation with the agent, to say, I'm happy to go ahead with the purchase should the interest rate not be higher than, in this case, 8% if you're a first-time buyer. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. It is your right to do so. It forms part of the contract, but it's important to do it at offer stage. Once you are making the offer, you cannot ask for that to be inserted after we've had the bond approved and then you're not happy with the rate. It's very important to do it up front when you're making the offer to the seller.
So just for all the listeners tonight, this is not a norm in many contracts. Make sure you protect yourself against this by adding it and by asking the advice of your agent to do it for you. Transfer date is, in this market, in the times we're in currently with lockdown, it's a difficult one to predict. Usually it takes between 2 to 3 months to transfer property. In the current market with lockdown, we're looking at 4 to 5 months. Once again, when you get to this stage, talk to your agent to make sure that you get the advice on what the attorneys are, the feedback from the attorneys in terms of what they can expect of when transfer will happen. Important here with transfer, unfortunately, you can't select the conveyancer. That is for the sellers. The seller is got privy to decide on the conveyancing attorney, and the costs are paid by you. The costs relating to purchase of property, if you do make use of a bond, you have the conveyancing fees, you've got transfer duties, and then you also have mortgage bond registration fees. So 2 attorneys will be appointed to facilitate the transfer process. Every now and then it does happen where the same attorney does the bond registration as the transfer of the property in your name. Make sure you talk to your agent, that they advise you on the total cost that is going to be coming your way and paid on transfer. The transfer duty is paid about a month before transfer, where the conveyancing fees and the mortgage bond fees are paid before or at time of lodgement, when property are going into deeds office. and they are ready to lodge to register into your name. Occupation, vital in this market. If you take occupation, it's either on transfer or on a certain date in the future. If you want to be sure of a certain date, if you have to get out of a lease or whatever it might be, it's better to add a certain date here and not transfer date. Should another lockdown happen, at least you can move into a property. And vital to the on what the occupational interest should be. Now, this is a tricky question because there's many opinions on this, but there's three thought processes. It could either be what the rent should be on that property as occupational interest, or it could be the seller negotiating what he's currently paying on his bond, that amount he would like to cover as occupational interest, or you as purchaser is saying, I'm not going to be paying more than my bond installment when the property registers. Once again, a good discussion to have with your estate agent. Foot stewards, I've mentioned to you that foot stewards clause is still in the contract, but you are protected with the disclosure that, like I mentioned earlier, where the seller have disclosed with the agent a list of items in terms of latent and patent defects. Make sure you see that document before you sign on the dotted line. This must form part of your contract. Now, all this information, what are you to do with all of this? At Rawson, whether you buy through us or not, we are saying appoint us and use us to act as your trusted advisor. We would love to be of to your service. We have all the resources, we have all the tech available to make sure your journey is smooth, and we look forward to do business with you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Jaco, thank you for joining in tonight, and we look forward to be working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Schalk. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Great, thanks.
Megan, are there any questions from any listeners that we can answer, or is this?
Schalk, yes, we do have a few questions. If we've got time to answer, probably about 5 or 6 questions.
Yes, we can take another 10 minutes, Roger, so go for it.
Okay, great. Jaco, the question for you is from Tatiana. She's a foreigner that has a work permit. Would she qualify for a bond if she wants to buy a home here?
Well, that's an interesting question. The banks will look at which permits. Traditionally, the banks only offer 50% if you do not have a South African ID number, but they do waive the rules. Some of the banks have given us 70%. We have managed to get 100% once or twice from one of the particular banks. They will look at the client's individual risk profile. They look at the account behavior. Does the client have other accounts? The client's employment status. Is the client full-time employed, self-employed, or contract basis? So they'll look at the risk associated to the application. I must be honest, it's quite difficult to get 100%, but we'll definitely get a bond. That is for sure. But more than often than not, we'll have to put a deposit down if a client does not have a South African ID number.
Great, thanks, Jaco. Another question, Schalk, for you from Esme is, when properties are listed in their price, are their prices inflated, and will sellers have more appetite for dropping their prices in this current market?
Esme, thank you for the question. I want to try to give a short answer. We do advise our clients how to position their properties when they launch to the market. It does happen often where people suggest to us that they would like to test the market at a certain price. And it is for you as the purchaser to inquire and to ask the questions on what has been happening in the suburb or in the estate or in a sectional title, and to interpret the data with your agent to come to an understanding of whether the pricing of the property is realistic. So as far as the question is, it is for you to do the research with the agent, asking the right questions to determine where the price should be. I think that's how I can answer that question. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah. Thank you, Schalk. Jaco, another question for you is, when you did the calculations on a 10,000 Rand gross income to qualify for a bond of 375K, how do you do that calculation? I've got Wayne who obviously wants to work out what he would qualify for. So what is a quick formula for him to work out what he could qualify for?
Quick formula to use. You take your gross income, let's in this instance a 10,000 rand. Then we times that by 30%, which is the 30% limiting factor. That then gives you 3,000. And then we look at the current factor that we use on prime interest rate is 8. That's determined by formulas from the bank side. So then you divide that 3,000 by 8, and that gives you 375, which then times by 1,000 is a bond of 375,000 that you should qualify for.
Okay, great. Jaco, another question for you. Us as estate agents get it a lot, and I'm sure you bond originators must get it every day. We know you probably can't answer it, but what are the chances of there being another interest rate cut this year?
Very interesting question. I wish we knew the answer to that. There has been talk, if or everything we've read up, yes, from what we've read, it should be another one later in the year, but it's not going to go much lower than what we currently are. If it comes down another one, it will be 0.25. It won't be 0.5 or 1% again. It should be 0.25, but then it's going to stabilize. We don't anticipate for it to go much lower than what we currently are.
Okay, great. Schalk, and then a question for you from Wayne. He's just asking if you could explain the whole replacement value. If you could explain that process on the property.
Replacement value is taking current building costs and multiply that by the square meters of the property. There is a different building cost associated with outbuildings than your main dwelling. Again, a discussion for yourself between yourself and the agent. Land value, if available, is obviously the land value. If you take a suburb, for example, like let's say a build-up suburb, the way we calculate land value, we work in reverse. We take the average sale price for properties in an area. We take the house sizes and we again reverse the calculation by saying the average property size in X suburb is 250 square meters. Then whatever is left over is potential or possible, what is a possible value to the land. And why we say that is not many people will buy land in that area then at 3 times that price and build at current building cost and be in for a total cost of 5 million where the average sale price of the area is 3.5 million, for example. Once again, if you want more information, Wayne, I'm happy to have the discussion with you over.
Okay, great. So one more question that it's actually posed to both of you. It's one question that you could both answer in your fields. Is in the price bracket of 2.5 million to 4 million, what is the activity like in house sales and also bond applications? So maybe Jaco, you could answer that first for us.
Okay, great, Roger. Yes, up to the 2.5 million price bracket, we've had quite a lot of interest. Between 2.5 and 4 million, I would say up to 3 million. We also have some activity, but at the moment between 3 and 4 million, it's not that busy at the moment. It's very quiet, if I can put it that. The most activity we have are around the 2.5 million, between 2 and 3 million. That's the most activity we on our side have on the bond application side of things.
Great.
I can maybe add to that, Wayne, by saying that should you be looking to invest in the 3 million to 4 million price bracket, you'll be buying very good value for money, given that there's a lesser demand and a higher supply. And the rest, I fully agree with Jaco.
Great. All the other questions I think were covered. So yeah, thank you guys. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.